There we go. Excellent. All right. Well, good afternoon. This is now our third meeting, but we're going to be going over week 2 or module 2 of the classroom, the content in the classroom. So it is about the power of yes and no. And the primary takeaways from the first video, which were about the emotional bank account, are that it can be helpful to think about relationships as existing outside of ourselves almost, right? And that it's almost a separate entity that we create with another person. So it's kind of like a visualization. There's you, the other person is over here, and then the relationship kind of sits in the middle in terms of bank accounts, right? So you have your personal bank account, the other person has their personal bank account, and then the relationship has a bank account. So that was, for me, that was like an interesting way to think about things, that the relationship sort of had a life of its own or an emotional bank account of its own. And that keeping relationships healthy requires a regular nurturing and attention by both parties, right? It's not one-sided. Any relationship that is only getting nurtured and attended to and deposits being made in it by one person is not a healthy relationship, right? So that idea that it's got to be coming from both directions. It's especially true that we both have to be nurturing the bank account if there are withdrawals coming out of it on either side. If there's no withdrawals coming out, then relationships might be able to be pretty secure for a pretty long time. Do any of you have friends that maybe you only talk to once or twice a year, but there's no withdrawals coming out throughout the year, so you just kind of pick up where you were last time you left off? I definitely have more of those. As I get older, there's more of those because there's so many more relationships in your life over the years, and there's just, they're not all immediate anymore. But definitely, if there aren't withdrawals coming out, then, and this is a great thing to think about with our horses too, right? That if we're not taking withdrawals from that relationship account, it's actually okay. I work with a lot of clients who really get upset that they can only visit their horse once or twice a week because of life and boarding situations. And I always say, honestly, like, nothing bad is happening during all that time. There's no reason that your horse isn't going to be perfectly happy to see you when you come back, as long as the horse's, basic needs are being met. I mean, obviously, if it's in a toxic kind of boarding situation, or their needs aren't being met, then withdrawals are getting taken out of that horse's emotional bank account all the time, and that can spill over because, as I think I talked about this, if one person's emotional bank account goes too far in the red, then they just, you just start taking from whatever other bank accounts are available to you to try to refill it. So if a person or a horse is in a situation all day, every day where withdrawals are being taken out, then you show up, it could definitely affect the relationship. But assuming your horse's basic needs are being met, aren't a lot of withdrawals coming out of their account, it's perfectly okay usually if you can't get there every day. So just that idea, right, of just being conscious of, are there deposits going in? Are there withdrawals coming out? How much of each, and what do we need to do to, keep it at least at there's a little bit of a balance in the bank account. Any other thoughts about that? Did you find that analogy helpful, or yeah, Martine, nodding your head.
Yeah, it was really useful, and I have a relationship at work where I didn't know why I was so irritated all the time whenever I would speak with her.
Mhm.
And more recently, it's been all of a sudden getting a lot better. And she's had a lot of stuff going on at home
Ah,
for a long time. And she knows my certain boundaries. I've clarified them, I've set them up a couple of times. And she goes over, she'll even comment that she's reaching over and
oh,
plows through. And I was like, "Oh," you reading that, I was like, "Okay, her bank account is so low that she's just pillaging mine." And that
yes.
gave me a little bit more softness to her. And now that she's out of that yuckiness on her own personal side, she's able to yield to my boundaries better, and like we have a lot, like she's filling up the bank account now too, just generally with her relationship. So it was very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Yeah. I've also found that sometimes, boundary conversations can be pretty sensitive and emotional, but sometimes, especially with coworkers or someone that maybe I don't have a lot of intimacy with, but I can talk about it in this way. Like when you talk about the emotional bank account and it just takes it outside of us, it's just a metaphor, right? A visual that you can help people put in their heads, and then they can go, oh, yeah, my bank account is like empty. Yeah. So awesome. Alana, did you have anything you wanted to mention about that one?
I just found it really interesting because I could put that into perspective for a lot of people in my life where they might not have their needs met and they sort of take it out on people that are maybe more vulnerable to giving more out of what they have. It's like
Right.
helping the homeless in a way, like they have no money and I'm giving them all my money. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's very useful to think about a lot.
Hmm.
And I do think about it a lot with my horses too, about the emotional bank accounts. And if, especially Tempo, who can tend to be a little bit on the, she has some aggressive tendencies sometimes. And when they start to show up, I have to stop and go, maybe there haven't been that many deposits in her emotional account. And there may be things that feel like withdrawals to her. Like for Tempo, anything that's even like the schedule changes. She's such a control freak that these little things can feel like withdrawals of, I got distracted in the middle of feeding. I didn't hold up my end of the bargain in her mind, right? Those feel like little withdrawals to her, and she's very sensitive to them. So rather than just getting irritated with her, I can stop and think, what felt like withdrawals for her recently, and how do I put a deposit back in that relationship account?
Hmm.
And she's not a touchy-feely horse, so it's not usually about going and loving on her. It's about helping her feel a little more in control, or getting back on a schedule that makes her feel safer, right? I know that those are the ways to put deposits in her, in the bank account with her. It's different with different horses. So that's another thing, is deposits don't look the same in all your relationships. You all probably often heard about love languages, whether you buy into that or not. The point is that every individual, you have to understand what is a deposit for them in order to make a deposit in the shared bank account. Because there are some things that might feel like a deposit to you that are actually a withdrawal to somebody else. So there is a little bit more to it that can get a little more nuanced. Yeah. And what's a deposit in one relationship account is not a deposit in another one. So it's a simple concept, but not always so simple to implement. Hey, Poppy. Good to see you. All right. So, well, let me ask you, coming on, I know you just came on, but we just kind of did a little review of the emotional bank account. And did you have anything you wanted to share about that? Do you find that analogy helpful?
Yeah, it was interesting. It's one that I've come across before, and I think it was interesting because I've put a lot of thought into it, especially with Willow, because she's such a fickle horse, and she was so hard to like get her trust in the first place,
Mm.
because all of the usual things just didn't work. Which I feel like so many of us have that horse that we're like, there was that one that just turned everything on its head, which is amazing. Um, so I feel like I've put a lot of time into going, okay, what works for her. So for her, she really likes when I just sit and hang out and don't touch her, and I'm not particularly even engaging with her, just
Mm.
like sitting and reading or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I've not put so much thought into that in like my other relationships. Like I've got one really close friendship that we talk about this kind of stuff quite a lot, and we like I don't know how I've managed to end up with a friend as amazing as her, but all of my other relationships I've just not thought about it. So it's really cool to
To think about it, yeah.
yeah,
And in some relationships, we may be able to talk to the person about it, and in some, it may just be something you do internally that you keep track of and make note of what the emotional bank account relationship is in, and you don't necessarily have to both be consciously thinking about it. That's what's kind of fun about it. That's
yeah,
kind of fun about everything with boundaries, honestly, if we shift things for ourselves, in ourselves, it is amazing how much starts to shift in the relationship, even if the other person is not like actively engaged with doing boundary work with you. That's what's really cool about it, is that you don't actually have to have the other person be an active participant in order to make some big shifts in your life and in the relationship. So excellent. Yeah, so that's just a good tool for you to take with you about the emotional bank accounts. Then we went into the reading on clean relations, which I know Alana said she really loved in the comments, and I really like that reading as well. So clean relations is just kind of a summary, happen when the connections, interactions, and check-ins between two people, or a horse and a person, two individuals, I guess I should say, are consistently based in genuine care, honesty, and transparency. In other words, there's no pretending happening, right? Pretending is an unclean way of being in relationship together. There are no games, no manipulation, none of that kind of deceit or hiding from each other. It's just, in many ways, what you see is what you get, right? It's all very clean. So I'm curious if you have any relationships in your life right now that you feel, well, let's start with human relationships first. Do you have any human relationships in your life that you feel right now are already pretty clean? We'll go around. Let's see. Alana, do you have any? It's okay if you don't too.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
A lot of them feel very messy, very either I'm putting all the work in and it's not reciprocated, especially at uni, or people come to me when they need help. It's very like use and abuse almost at uni. So I don't tend to like vibe. I just go and do my own thing.
Okay. So that's good. That's your strategy for keeping your emotional bank account safe in that situation, right? Is to just not allow them to take the withdrawals. Yeah, but yeah, that sounds like those are a little bit messier. So that's like a life goal, right? I want to have at least one really clean human relationship in my life, like something to work toward. Yeah, awesome. Martine, what about you? You have any in your life right now?
Yeah, I have a few actually, which is really nice.
That's nice.
I think the most obvious one's my husband and I. Like, we have a pretty good relationship, and not to
Awesome.
say in order to clean, sometimes we need to be extra clear.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot, both pretty clear, pretty clean behavior wise. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And that's the ideal, obviously, right? Because our spouse or our life partner is who we spend the most time with. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful it's lovely that you can say that already, right? It's also lovely if that's an image that you can come into when you're first beginning a relationship, right? And to say,
Well, yeah, it's a good point, because for quite a while, like, so we'll have our 20-year next year. So it's
congratulations.
been it's been a while, but like those first 10 years, it was an evolution and how just exploring again, what are the boundaries? What do I want? That kind of stuff. And then learning how to communicate. But yeah, we're
Yeah.
getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of us do it the hard way versus like understanding it from the beginning and then have that as like the goal. But you do realize the longer you're with someone, like you really can't, our souls can't stay in relationships that are intimate, that are unclean. It just sucks the life out of you, right? So come hell or high water, usually you figure out how to be real with each other, and kind also, like, but yeah, some of us, it takes a lot more trial and error to figure out how to get there, but eventually we do. Yeah. All right. Poppy, what about you? Do you have any relationships, human relationships in your life right now that you would say feel clean?
Yeah, that the friend that I just mentioned, she's amazing, and it does feel like, yeah, like we basically, and also we don't talk about everything to each other, so sometimes there'll be stuff that she'll be like, oh, actually, I don't really want to bring that up right now, I've already talked to my family or whatever about it, which is really cool, because I feel like a lot of, I've either had friendships where it's been like quite distant or like really like codependent, and you tell each other everything.
Yes.
So actually, it's it's really cool. Or like sometimes we'll be like planning to call each other because she doesn't live nearby anymore. And then she'll be like, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired. Let's not have a call tonight. So like things like that. It's really cool. And it does feel like we can just communicate in a really easy way and be really honest and have a nice time. So yeah, I don't know how I managed to find her, but it's very, very nice.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And so now you have that kind of stands up. I mean, knowing that not every relationship is going to be like that in our lives, but definitely the ones that are closest to us, it's like really good to do what we can to have those be as clean as possible. And it's wonderful when we can have at least one or two of those. And yeah, it means you can say no to each other and it's okay. You can be honest. Yep. And I love what you said also about, a lot of people think intimacy is just that we tell the other person everything. We're going to get into this a little bit more. There's a whole module on boundaries and vulnerability. That's not necessarily the case at all, right? We don't need to dump all our stuff on everyone all the time. And that's different than being deceitful or lying or hiding something. It's just saying, I'm actually okay. I've got this covered. It doesn't impact the other person. It doesn't need to impact the other person. So I don't need to put it on them, right? Very, very important skill to have. And that's a form of containment boundary, actually, when we can decide not to put something unnecessarily on someone else. Yeah, lots of good stuff there. All right. Yeah, and did you have any other thoughts or want to speculate at all about like what does it look like, or do you have an example of what it looks like to you when you have clean relations with your horse? What does that mean? And can horses be unclean in their relationships? Do you think that's even possible? Martine, yeah, you have an example?
Yeah, when my sister brought her gelding into the herd a couple of years ago, he was young, and my mare is a bossy, maybe insecure type, and I think took close to probably a year before he finally. She was very clean. She was maybe a little excessive to try to get those yields and stuff, but it took him a year before he finally is like, oh, I understand what you mean now. And now they're kind of more flowing in relationship, but it took a long time. Yeah.
Took a long time. Interesting. And
Yeah.
do you think he just didn't have the social skills? Do you know much about his history?
I don't, um, anything's possible.
It's possible. Yeah. The only real example I can think of totally that it was like not impossible for the horses to have clean relations was a horse that I had for a few years here, who was a former show jumping horse that had, I mean, big 18 hand, warm blood thoroughbred cross. And he had lived in barns, like stalls or private paddocks his whole life, after he was weaned. So he was never in with other horses because, he was white and they don't like him to get dirty or hurt or anything. And he was wonderful with people, but basically the reason he was wonderful with people was because he was just like, you can do whatever you want with me. I don't care. Like, I don't have any opinion about anything. And when he got out with the horses, he had absolutely no idea that he even had a personal space, what to do with it. He would go into just like shut down if there was pressure put on him by the other horses. He would almost go, sometimes he would start to colic. Like, that's how stressed he would be because he just didn't even know how to, um, didn't have any idea how to engage in the herd. So that was hard, and it was hard for everybody because communication is necessary for clean relations. You have to know how you feel and you have to be able to articulate it, right? And he couldn't. So yeah, I think naturally, like in the wild, there probably are very few horses that don't know how to have clean relations. They learn that in the herd. That's kind of what they're nurtured to do. But I do think there are domesticated horses that haven't had the right socialization, with herds. And also there are a lot that are taught to shut down with people, right? To not express themselves, to just take whatever it is that we want to do with them or do to them. terms of touching them wherever we want or grooming them, or, we just want them to stand. We teach them to stand still. So if you're a person also who's been taught or conditioned as a child not to express yourself, not to have opinions, not to, right? You can see that makes it a challenge for those of us who kind of had that upbringing to be in clean relations, because it can feel really challenging or almost even wrong to like state how we feel and what we want. So it happens in people and horses. But generally speaking, I think horses are cleaner than we are.
I have an interesting example. So today I was treating a pre-stallion, and I almost felt like the owner was exceeding my boundaries as well as his. Every time he would go to nudge me or like, teeth on my clothes, she would just get the lead rope and whack him with it. And I just thought she was almost affecting my boundaries through the horse, because I was like, hey, why are you doing that? Because although it was impacting him, it was also impacting my work and what I was trying to do with him, because I can't treat an unrelaxed horse that can't display when it's in pain or stuff like that. And all he was doing was such gentle movements, and she was trying to lecture me on how stallions are so dangerous, how I shouldn't. But I just felt like he wasn't being dangerous. He was just standing and his head came towards me, not malicious, just curiosity. He was just looking at me and he just
Mm.
got whacked, and I was just like, why? Like, it really winds me up.
Yeah, that'll be something as you go into practice that will be really important for you to learn. And not saying it will always be successful, but learn how to set in place boundaries with the owners that allow you to do the work, right? Even if
Like,
sometimes,
how can I tell her, can you stop hitting your own horse? Like, it's like, I feel like that would have just ended horribly. I don't know how to word it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it would be more like, saying, I really need to be able to get his feedback in order to
Mm,
know, if what I'm doing or whether he has pain, like, right, like his feedback is very important to me as part of my
mm,
process. So, I understand what you're saying. I know I want to be safe. You're not responsible for my safety right now, or
mm.
whatever. I don't know. That might be something to talk with your
Yeah, she's
supervisor
very
about.
traditional. Like, she's very much, this horse needs to obey me. I mean, if because he's a stallion, a working stallion, I mean, if he gets his wiener out for any unknown reason, she will literally tap it and say, put it back. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
she's very extreme, and she punishes him for any sort of thing. And I feel like that's very sad that, I mean, they get turned out into solitary paddocks. It's just, they have no real boundaries. Their stalls have bars everywhere, even so they can't put their head outside. So there's nothing. They're just basically in prison.
Yeah, that's really sad. That's a
Mm,
very tough situation. And we'll talk about this again some more, but one of the things with boundaries is learning to assess which situations can be influence. Is it worth having a boundary conversation about? And which situations are, like, right now you're in school, so you kind of have to be in this situation, but that might be one where you just realize like there's so many obstacles to being able to have a real conversation with boundaries. And I'm not someone who, like you right now, are not someone who's in decision making authority about the barn, about how the horses are done. um there's some situations where the best boundary we have is to walk away or get ourselves out of that environment as soon as we can, but we also have to figure out what boundaries can we put in place to manage it while I'm here.
mhm,
So again, I think, maybe not thinking about being able to change everything about that horse's situation because you don't have that control, but are there little boundaries you could have, like I said, that might manage the, like, while I'm working with the horse or interacting, can I have boundaries around that particular dynamic, right? Even
mhm,
if it's like asking the owner to stand outside the
mhm.
stall or step back a little, or you're welcome to observe, but it's helpful for me if I'm the only one interacting with the horse so that I know his responses are based on me and what I'm doing,
Yeah.
right?
There's
Um,
just so much, I think, I don't know how else to describe it, snobbery with stallions. It's like only I can handle. I mean, she walked away from the stable and he went to the door and she went, "Oh, he's obsessed with me." And as soon as she went away, he just went back to eating. And I'm just like, there's so much projection. I was like, I mentally, I was like, I don't think he cares. I think he was just looking because you left. Like, it's just, it did make me laugh a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's just so much like snobbery with stallions. You have to be a known person to touch them, and it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in the horse industry that just like doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, stallions, and both stallions and mares in different ways, depending on who it is, can have like really strong, very inappropriate feelings and like practices and beliefs about them.
Yeah.
So that's
Because I've had more close calls with mares than I have with stallions. As in when I'm palpating the girth and stomach area. I've had more close head kicks than I have with male horses. So they're actually, I think mares should be the ones to have more, you know, watching of the space. But
yeah, I think they all really deserve to be listened to, and
Mhm.
any animal that has its intact hormones just like us is going to be a little more complicated. I think honestly that the predominance of geldings in the horse world sort of gives people a false understanding about,
Mhm.
the sensitivity and emotionality of a fully intact being. But also I think both mares and stallions, if they're listened to and well socialized, unless they have a physical challenge, can be very easy to be in relationship with. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing she said which made me laugh really bad was that apparently stallions are unable to feel pain like geldings can. She said, "Oh, my stallion can get injected. He just has to deal with it." Because when I was palpating his neck and doing flexion, he was resisting it because there was a pain response. She went, "Oh no, he's just being silly. He can have inj," and I was just like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, boy, man, yeah, that's
I can't. I just didn't have the strength to deal with that. Like,
service providers have to put up with a lot. And those, some of those situations, I don't know exactly, but if you're only like dealing with a client horse for a short period, you're not going to be able to fix all of those problems. So it's really just about putting whatever boundaries you need to for you to be able to do your job
Mhm.
effectively. And it's kind of sad. I'm sure sometimes you have to almost dissociate from the well-being, the emotional
Mhm.
well-being of the animal if that's just not something we can influence always. And sounds
Yeah.
like with an owner like that, that's probably not, you know,
No.
going to be a productive conversation.
No, she's not. I mean, she put her horse down for loss of use because she wanted to claim the money back. So, yeah, that just sort of says everything about it.
Yeah. Wow.
Not the nicest of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Boundaries are going to be important for you in the work you're going to be
I
doing.
know. I'm scared.
Yes. So yeah, there are some areas where we're not going to have clean relations, and there's probably not even needs to be our goal in some situations because it's just not. The clean relations is really for the most important relationships in our life, the intimate relationships in our life, and that can include business and client relationships as well if they're ones that are consistently in our life. If you see someone only once or twice a year, it's not as important maybe, right? But if it's someone that you work with daily or weekly and consistently, it becomes a little more important maybe to have cleaner relations in the relationship. All right. Anything else anyone wants to say about clean relations? Then let's go into a little bit of the I can't remember if I think this was in the self-assessment about who can you say no to in your trusted tribe. So it's a little different than clean relations is a pretty high standard, right? But there may still be other people in your life that you are able to say no to. So I won't know who these people are necessarily if you just use a name, but you're also welcome to say my dad, my mom, whatever you want to, whatever you're comfortable saying. But is there anyone, let's start with you this time, Poppy. Is there anyone in your life right now that you feel like you can say no to? You have the one friend, obviously.
I found this one really interesting because I was like, well, it depends on the context. And
Mm,
actually with the exercise we were doing as well, I kind of was like, actually, I feel like I can always say no when I feel like I've got a good reason to. So I'm like, oh, I can't do that because I have another time commitment. When it's like logistically difficult, or with horses as well, I'm like, I can say no to you because if you do that, you're going to get hurt, rather than just because I want to. Like that feels like when I can do those things, when it feels like it's something outside of myself, if that makes sense.
That makes total
Yeah. Um, so I feel like when it's a situation like that, like pretty much everyone, and then when it's more like personal just because I want to, I found that a really interesting one and an interesting differentiation. But like I would say generally like my closest family, generally like there's, yeah, that's okay. Like it's not my favorite thing to do in the world, um but it's not like impossible. But it was an interesting differentiation to have, and it's still not like, yeah, saying no just because it feels right or whatever. That's what will get me a bit stuck.
excellent, excellent insight. Yeah. And that's that second part are the ones you really want to be able to work on and develop for boundaries, because boundaries are about protecting my own interests, my own time, my own feelings, my own preferences. It's obviously, a lot easier to say no on behalf of someone else, like someone else's safety, or I'm committed to something else. So we don't have to own the no as much then for our own reasons. So that's just a great thing to notice about yourself, and to know that I'll need to get work on getting more comfortable with that in order to be good with boundaries, right? My own boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus like boundaries for someone else's safety or someone else's interests. Yeah. Great insight. Thank you. Martine, what about you?
Uh, yeah, excuse me. That pretty much sums up my experience too. And to the point where like I didn't notice it at the time, but my husband asked me to do something really menial, real like could have easily been done, and I had this like, oh, I don't want to do it, but I couldn't say no. I actually tried to negotiate for him to withdraw the request rather than me saying no. So
Interesting. Yes.
yeah, yeah, something I got to work on.
Yeah. That's a great insight too. And to realize, gosh, look at the like extent to which my psyche wanted to like try to manipulate this situation just so I don't have to have the discomfort of saying, I don't want to do that. Right?
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Excellent. Alana, what about you? Who can you
Mine
say?
is similar to Poppy and Martine, but I also have this problem where it's actually a recent example of this is I got asked to go somewhere and at first I said yes. Then I did some research on it and actually I don't want to go anymore, but because I've made that commitment of saying yes and I lied and said that I'd paid to go when I actually didn't because I wanted her to think that, well, I actually was planning on going and I said to her that I've paid because she wanted, and I just like sort of anxiously said that I'd paid, but now I
Wow.
actually want to say no, so I'm probably going to just tell somehow, like, I don't know, I'm very anxious about cancelling plans that I've already done, which I feel bad about because I agreed to them initially, but then I had a change of mind and I didn't feel comfortable doing it anymore. So it's like I don't know how to like go back and change what I've already
Mhm.
said yes to.
So there's a couple things there. One is that obvious, so because of the anxiety around saying no, you tend to just say yes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then even to say, yes, I'm fully committed, I paid, right? When you
Yeah.
hadn't, right? You're kind of like going overboard to prove
Mm.
that you were
People pleasing. Yeah.
yeah, the people pleasing. So for you, definitely, I think a strategy that's going to be helpful to practice, even if you know you're going to say yes to something, is
Mm-hmm.
practice saying, let me think about it and I'll get back to you
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, right? Like just practice not saying yes to things in the moment. You don't have to say no, right? You just have to say, let me think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to need to check my schedule, or, whatever it is. To don't get into like a lot of lying about why you can't say yes. You can just say,
Mm-hmm.
think about it, or I need to check on some things, and then I'll let you know. That way, you really can make a thoughtful decision right? Before you tell someone yes, then you don't have to backtrack.
Yeah, now I have to backtrack like 5 times now and say, oh, suddenly the payment didn't go through. I don't know how I'm gonna.
It's like when we lie, then we get caught in another lie, right? The other thing is you could just fess up and say, this is the thing with me. I get anxious about saying no, and I went kind of overboard. I actually hadn't paid. Like, you could become totally clean if you wanted to, but you also can decide whether the relationship is one. If this is a relationship with someone who you care about and you want to
Mhm.
continue being in friendship with, you could just lay it all on the line and just say, look, this is an example of just how, like, I'm working on this stuff, but
Mhm.
is to know about me. And even you can ask someone to help you with, like, I need to work on not saying yes automatically to things. And
Mhm.
so next time, if you catch me doing it, you know, help me with that. Encourage me to take a little time and think about it. Encourage me to be.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on the relationship, but there are lots of different ways you could handle that. But for right now, I think for this sake with the class is to
Mhm.
just find a way to get yourself out of the thing that you don't want to do, right?
Mhm.
Because that's being honest to yourself, but also realize that every time you kind of lie, small or
Mhm.
big lie about something, it often creates another additional reason to lie later to cover it, right? So that's
Mhm.
a really bad pattern. Um, and you have to look at this situation right now, clean it up for now, but then take
Mhm.
a lesson learned from it for going forward. So
Yeah. I think my best way of saying with this one is that I made a mistake purchasing it because I needed to save the money, so I got a refund. And then done. And then I can just explain that, yeah.
yeah. So you can fix it quietly on your end on this one, right?
Mhm.
But then also think larger about, I don't want to have to put myself in that position again in the future where
Mhm.
I've said yes to something I didn't want to, and then I had to lie to kind of cover, get myself out of it. Like, that's not the ideal situation.
Yeah, and another thing I do as well is if I would cancel it, then I would be like, oh, I can go to the next one though. Like, I'm not gonna say that either
Don't
because
say it.
then I'm
Right.
digging myself another hole.
Exactly. Just practice, like, no guilt about it. Just say, whatever the reason is. And like you said, like, maybe you'll say, whether it's completely true or not right now, they're going to say that I didn't need to, I can't afford it. I'm not going to go this time, whatever. And this goes back to Poppy too. So you say you're good at saying no when it's on somebody else's behalf. One of the best things that one of my mentors taught me was that it's never a lie to say, I have another obligation, or I have another appointment, or I need to be somewhere else, because guess what? I have an appointment with myself, and I may not even know what I'm going to do at that time yet, but I'm marking that as my appointment with myself, and I'm gonna figure out how I'm using it later. Like, that's the level of, we need to give ourselves permission to say, as much as you would say no on somebody else's behalf, you need to say it on your behalf. And it's okay if you don't have something else planned. Like, a lot of times people say, I can't say no unless I have something else I'm obligated to.
Yeah.
No, you can say, I'm making an appointment with myself. I'd rather do something with myself than go do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, I have another commitment, and it's a commitment to myself. You don't have to say that part. You just say you have another commitment. So there's
I'm wondering if it's worth me telling her because my health has actually been pretty bad. I've been having tachycardia attacks. My heart's beating really fast, so I actually have to have an ECG. So I'm wondering if a show, because the show is quite loud and extreme, that probably would make it worse. So that wouldn't be a lie. And that did come up last week.
Yeah. So I think it's beautiful to be able to think about a reason that isn't a lie,
Hmm.
feels true in your
Because
body.
that one is really true. I would, to be honest, I probably would have gone, but now that I've actually had this issue, it's like really scary. So I think I wouldn't be able to go even if I wanted to, because I'd be worried about driving 2 hours with it and then all the extra stresses of that. So
Yeah,
that's not a lie, and I think I'd feel a lot better telling her that.
that's beautiful. And then you're sharing a little something about yourself and what's going on too,
Mm.
right? Without you're not doing it in a way to try to manipulate
Get
anything.
out of it. Mm.
You're just saying, I want to honor what's going on with my own health. And so
Hmm.
choosing not to, I'm gonna get a refund and not
Sit
go.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get a
Sit,
refund on
sit
the
this
money I
one out.
didn't pay.
Gonna get a refund and sit this one out and take care of myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. See? So just taking a little time to think through it and think
Mhm.
about your values. If I want to uphold my commitment not to go, or the truth that I don't really want to go, and then I'm going to like really sit with myself about why I don't want to go, and then maybe I can share that reason. Yeah,
That works.
nice job. Yeah, so that feels better, right? You don't have
Yes.
to have the like, oh my gosh, and I'm being dishonest on top of it, right?
No, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. So cleaner, cleaner. Yep. Excellent. Okay. Let me see what I had here. Ah, yeah. Well, this kind of goes on to what I think a little bit into what we were just talking about with Alana is well, let me go back up here first. Let me talked about them in order that I wrote the notes. So when we have an obstacle to saying no to someone, this goes back to like only being in control of like our own part of the conversation, our own part of the relations is to ask ourselves, is there anything that we need to do to clean up our end of the relationship that might make it easier to say no, right? So Alana, you really taking the time to think about whether you want to go and why, and what's your reason for not wanting to go, and what's your reason if you're going to share a reason, what is that, right? And can you be cleaner with that? And another question is, have we been doing anything to take withdrawals out of that shared bank account? So Martine, you kind of said that, right? By trying to almost like manipulate him into taking back the request, right? Wasn't Definitely wasn't a deposit in the account, right? So that's a withdrawal. So it's again, it's like you guys were all already doing this already with the nose, is to say there's maybe some pieces of this I need to own that I'm trying to put on somebody else. So wherever we're behaving uncleanly in the dynamic, and it's important to ask ourselves about that, because if we clean up our end of it, and I think most of you just gave examples, right? If I clean up my end of it, then the other person doesn't really need to do anything, and the relationship suddenly feels cleaner, and I'm able to say no when I thought that I couldn't before. So again, we don't have to ask the other person to change in any way. We just have to clean up our part. Yep. Now, if we go through everything and there isn't really anything we feel like we can clean up on our end, and we still can't say no to the person, or the other person isn't hearing our no, something like that, they're getting upset, angry, hostile if we try to say no, then it starts to be like, okay, what's my boundary here? Have I tried making the request that I need to, the request to honor my boundary? Sometimes we haven't done that, right? So we can't expect someone to honor our boundary if we haven't made the request that they honor it. Then if they still don't honor it after we've asked for it, then that's when we get into the setting a boundary and then possibly enforcing a boundary, right? But it doesn't sound like any of the situations you guys have given so far, except potentially maybe the woman who owns the stallion, although you didn't go to the point of making the request, but you could kind of play out that possibly if you made the request, she might have pushed back on it, or right, gotten even aggressive or hostile. So we could suppose about it, but it didn't actually happen. But there are some relationships where when we do try to say our no, that we get pushed back in an unhealthy way. So but we'll wait until there's one that has actually happened, if there is one, and then we'll use it as a case study. So keep in mind, Alana, if you have any of those client ones at work or at school that get really, yeah, and then we can talk about how do you put a specific boundary in place. Okay, so then we're gonna go on to the affirmations, right? Which may not seem like an experiential practice, but it is. And when I first started doing affirmations years ago, it felt really weird. I was like, I don't know, affirmations, like this is just words, right? We're just talking stuff. I did find that affirmations really were helpful to me when I started doing them. I put a few up on my bathroom mirror, so I would say them all the time. So I want to get a little bit about what you thought about these and which ones resonated most for you, if you remember from the list. I know for me, when I first started doing some of these, two that really were helpful for me was, no matter what happens, I can handle it. Because I didn't believe that at first. So it was like, I just kept repeating those words. No matter what happens, I can handle it. I can handle it. And it was like a little cheerleader for myself. But the more I said it, the more I was like, you know what, I can handle it. Yeah, of course I can handle it. Right. So that affirmation was very helpful for me. And then the other one was that it is not my responsibility if others expect more from me than I can give. But it is my responsibility not to give more than I can give, right? That's the insinuation there. So it was kind of putting it back to like, it's not my responsibility if you are expecting more from me than I can give. So those two were really powerful for me. What about Alana? Did you like the affirmations?
I
Or
liked all of them.
you liked all of them?
Yeah, I think they're all very good in their own way for different circumstances.
Yes.
So I probably will refer to that if something happens and see which one resonates with that. Maybe I can do that for the stallion day and see what happened today and see what one would work with that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Even both of those scenarios, actually, even talking to your family,
Mm,
right? So both of
mm-hmm,
them, so that we find that place in ourselves. And this again is another reason why really good to ask for that pause before you say yes to something. So you can go back to these and go, okay, what do I need to say to myself? It's okay to say no, right? My energy and time are valuable. Do these mantras to yourself a little bit and then go have the conversation or respond to the individual however you need to.
mm-hmm.
Martine, what about you? Were there any of them that resonated for you?
First of all, I just wanted to confirm your feeling that they do work. Like I was always like, "Yeah, that's crazy." Like, and my therapist recently made me do it a couple of times, and then I had like this big release, like yawning and stuff. And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, it is crazy. It's crazy
It's
how it works.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more like I don't believe it because like that's like that shell, right? So then once you break open that shell, then anyway, I think at first I was like, some of them I don't like because they kind of push me towards like overcommitting or over
Ah.
extending myself.
Mm.
But then, like Ilana had mentioned, like it's case specific, and so there's a variety. What kind of stood out to me is I can choose who and what I want in my life.
Yes.
Um,
Ooh.
Specific, it's all work related, but like, yeah, it's and people pleasing kind of thing, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting that the affirmations, some like that one, kind of flips the responsibility back to us, right? It's like freeing to know I can choose, but then it's also like, oh crap, I have to choose. If I can choose, then I need to do that. So there's layers to it, and yeah, for me too, with some of the ones that really were challenging or hard to step into was like literally standing in front of the mirror and saying them to myself. Like something about practicing saying it, something about making eye contact with myself while I said it helped me embody them rather than just reading the words, but like speaking the words and particularly speaking them in the mirror was really powerful. Yeah. Poppy, what about you?
I found this one really interesting because I'm really rubbish at like saying stuff out loud because like it's like I'm here in this house with my parents and it's just like I'm just sat there going, right, this whatever. Like I've got a bunch that I've of like oaths that I've kind of done to my horses that I've called my like joyful commitments, and I do them every time I turn up and I'm just saying it to the horses and then
Yeah.
it's fine. And like those are almost like my little like they're almost like containment boundaries for me because it's like, oh, I joyfully commit to honor your voice and your choice or whatever, like loads of things like that. And that's really easy to do. But the idea of just like being sat at home doing
Mhm.
the things for me, that it's like, so I mean I wrote some of them. I'm planning to like write some in my phone and like having that thing of like you can always have them there. But
Mhm.
definitely like to just be like, okay, yeah, this is weird. I'm sat here and I'm saying this and people can hear me and that's fine.
I love that even, right? That owns it even more to say it in front of other people or somebody else you love. But you can also like get in your car and say it to yourself in the rearview mirror, right? If you need to be in a private space. But I've seen some videos that almost, and it tells you how powerful this is because the videos almost make me cry. I've seen videos of like parents with young children saying the affirmations and having them the child repeat it after me. Like even if it's just like, I am strong, I am capable, I am right, those things. And I'm like, gosh, nothing like that happened in my childhood, but just to have those children get used to saying something like that out loud in front of other people. And just the kids are just like smiling and loving it. And I thought, wow, that's powerful stuff. So I love that you are maybe saying it even where someone else in your family can hear you say it.
Yes, that is the plan. And yeah, it really is really powerful. Like, I've done quite a bit of like EFT stuff. Like my other coach who also does horse stuff, she's brilliant. She does these like tappings that will be often specifically related to horse stuff, and they're like really, really good. So it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But yes, for you, definitely the pattern is like being able to do and say things for yourself,
Yeah,
right? Not even for your horse or for someone else that you love or
yeah,
care about,
yeah,
or advocating for yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
Beautiful. Um, let's see. Then we had the sample language for saying no. And again, these are not a complete list. These are just to get your juices flowing about some ideas of how you can say no. And I wondered if one, any of those were helpful. And two, what did you practice saying no to this week? Does anybody want to volunteer to go first with this one?
I think I said mine already with the horse lady. That's going to be my practical how to say no to her in my own way but I'm going to try and not make excuses next time. I'm just going to be like, I'm not feeling up to it, blah, 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 rather than deflect it because, yeah.
Yes.
I think it's important for other people to learn that it should be a normal thing to tell people that you're not up to it. I feel like it's not very normalized. It's more normalized to lie about why you don't want to go out. And people feel more alone because they might think they're the only one struggling when there's other people that are just too scared to be like, I don't want to go out today.
Yeah. And you may find there'll be people who are like, wow, you like that's cool. Just to say, I get that. I wish I had the courage to say that sometime.
Mm.
Or whether they say it or not, they probably are thinking it. So one of the things about this with boundary work is not just when we get better at it, does it improve our lives, but remember what we talked about in the beginning, how like there's so few people who model it in the human world that every time we're doing it for ourselves, we're actually showing somebody else how to do it, and we're giving them permission to maybe do it at some point. They might not have the courage to yet, but they're probably going to take note and go, dang, right?
Yeah, if they see one person do it, they're more likely to want to do it as well.
Yeah. And to say, oh, I'm actually allowed to be honest that I just don't feel like going, or I'm not feeling well, or I'm feeling like I just need some private time, or I need some me time, or I'm just tired. Like, it's okay. Yeah. Okay. So you have already decided what your no is going to be. Now it's implementing it, right? So you
I'm
have
gonna do that when I next see her, so it's in person. I don't feel on the spot.
beautiful. So make sure you practice what you want to say. Say it out loud. Practice it so that if you get that anxiety feeling in the moment, you don't revert
Yeah,
back to, like your autopilot, which is oh my God, right? And then you don't say what you
dug
want.
myself another hole, even deeper than before.
Exactly. So practice it to where you're pretty confident it's just going to be able to flow out more easily. Yeah. Okay. Who else had a story about saying no this week? Poppy?
Yeah, I had one. So it was the exact thing of that I can usually only do it if it was like I had to do something else. I was like, okay, so it was I had to babysit for a neighbour, and we'd like booked it ages in advance, all good. And then on the day, she's like, can you come almost an hour earlier? And she's really, really nice, but also, and I always feel quite like not obliged, but I really try and like make accommodations to her when she changes stuff last minute, because she's autistic and has got ADHD and her time management is appalling. And I'm like, I just get that it's really hard. And she had to leave earlier, so she'd have to leave the kids on their own for a bit. And I was like, oh God. But then I was like, hang on, no, it's going to make my day a real squeeze, and it's going to mean I'm not going to get time with my horses, and I'm not going to. And then I was just like, yeah, sorry, that's going to be a bit of a squeeze. I can still do the time we agreed, but I can't do that. And she was like, okay, fine, I'll just leave the kids with like playing some games. That's fine. They were totally fine when I got there. You know, they're not really, really young. And yeah, so that was that.
Congratulations. So how did you feel after you said that and it was all okay?
I think fine, because she was so fine. I think maybe if she'd have gone, oh God, that puts me in a really tricky situation or whatever. And also because she was like, oh, I get this is kind of weird to ask because it's really last minute. So I think it was helpful how she was about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really like, I was really glad. Like, later on, I was like, I'm so glad that I did this. Otherwise, I would be in such a rush. So yeah.
So there's a lot to that. One is that in my experience, more times than not, the person accepts our no, right?
Yeah.
They surprise us and it's like, oh, it wasn't really that big a deal. It's just they're so used to us saying yes and being accommodating that they don't even think twice about asking for it.
Yeah.
It never even occurs to them that, oh, maybe she can't do that. Right. So there's that. I think definitely your experience of having a win with that is not going to be, is going to be more the norm than the opposite. The other is like, that's a situation completely where she needs you, right? And most of the time when we need another relationship in our life, we're not going to go off the handle. Right? She's not going to risk that relationship with you by being a jerk and telling you, oh, I don't care if it messes up your day, right? This is all about me. So that's another one, is like realizing if there is value and mutual regard in the relationship, and you know that you're valuable in the relationship, not to misuse that, but to be able to stand in that and say, I have equal footing here too, right? And she I know she appreciates what I do for her, so she's not going to go off the handle at me, right? With that. So very good. And I love that you took a moment to check in with yourself and to say, hey, wait, you know what? I have a right to the things I was planning for this day. She's changing at the last minute, right? There might be a time sometime where you're like, actually, that's no problem at all. I'll come. But you shouldn't ever do it automatically without
Yeah.
checking in with
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Great example. Martine.
Yeah, I just had some aha moments with the other two speaking, like that knowing yourself, right? Like, first of all, it's like, it's because Poppy said something about how it was an easy, like, it almost felt like it was an easier setup for her, right? Like, it was fine, so she could manage it post. But I think those are the places where we need to practice this because we're so scared for that response. But my example is turning down a job. Well, not necessarily the biggest or not necessarily the smallest no. Would be, but you know what? Like, and I thought, okay, it's a cheater situation because I have full control of the decision. But then I was like, wait, that's the point.
That's the whole point. We actually always have full control of the
Oh my God. Yeah. So I have a ways to go about that. But anyways, I noticed afterwards, like I started by not saying yes right away. Like that was challenging for me, but I was like, I'll give it time. So I just said, come back to me. And then I realized I had to give an answer of some sort. So I bit the bullet. I did notice in the process though that I was almost placating, like, thank you so much for your time. You gave me so much information, da, da, da. And it's like, just say no. Like it's fine.
Right, right. Like honestly, this isn't someone you're going to continue to be in relationship with, right? They're going to,
Well, somewhat, but not much. Like we're still in the same area, so I will kind of run
okay,
into her and stuff.
okay.
But it was a positive thing. She just, it's okay. That's the ultimate thing. It's like, it's okay.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that I wouldn't be interested in another 6 months, for instance, you know, like if the position was available. But
Absolutely.
after I said that, I told her that, I had to run to my husband. I was like, oh my God, like completely flustered, like the adrenaline shot up. So yeah,
Beautiful.
practice some smaller no's.
Right. That was a big one, but it sounded like you needed to give an answer. So like there's the low-hanging fruit, smaller ones, and then there's the things that are like, well, this has to get dealt with right now. So I guess I put this into practice right now. So congratulations, even though you had the afterwards. It sounds like you handled it very well. And it is good. Maybe you can go, yeah, maybe I over placated there. I could have just. So it's also very helpful to kind of have the debriefing with yourself afterwards when we do these things. Even if it went well, you could say, how might it have gone even better? What could I have done even better? Right? What did I fall into a little bit of this? And not in a judgmental way, mostly be just like really happy and enthusiastic for yourself that you did it. But it is very helpful to go back through it, replay it, and say, what could I have done a little bit differently or a little bit better to make it even cleaner? And to let go of yeah, I mean, anytime someone makes us an offer, whether it's of a little thing or a big thing, job, we're never obligated to say yes, right? When someone makes an offer or extends an invitation, it doesn't come with this like assumption that you're going to say yes. It's just that. It's an offer or it's an invitation. And we have equal right to say no to it as yes to it. And one isn't better or worse. Well, actually, the one that is true to ourselves is better. Is the right answer. Not what's true to the other. And with something like that, with a job, really that person, maybe they really did want you to have the job, but they also just need to know so that they know to move on to the next candidate or whatever else they need to do to get on with their life. So yeah, the most important thing is giving the answer, eventually. So great examples, you guys. I'm proud of you. So the affirmations, one other thing I wanted to say about that, when I wrote these initially, and I haven't changed the wording on them, but a lot of them were like, that sounds okay. So the one of them is like, that sounds lovely, but I won't be able to make it. Have a great time. Right. I've since talked to some people about the power of changing one word, but to and, right? Because a lot of times, but feels like we just discredited everything that came before it. So if we start out with something lovely, like, I really appreciate the invitation, but I can't come, right? We could say, I really appreciate the invitation and I can't come. There's something that feels different about that. It feels like you're saying, yes, this part and this other part are both true. One doesn't have to be true, and then the other one discounts it. There's some situations where but is the only word that makes sense, but you could go back through these affirmations and see practice saying, would it make sense there to say and? And does that make it a little softer in how it lands for somebody? So I'm trying to think about another one. The first one, thank you so much for thinking of me. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. And I still really appreciate the invitation rather than, but I appreciate the invitation. I don't know. It's just something to play with. And I have found definitely in some situations when I'm practicing it ahead of time, I'm like, yeah, and feels so much better. Thank you for the invitation. And unfortunately, I can't make it. So just something to play with because it really is important. Part of why we feel bad is I think we feel like our response is negating the whatever was extended toward us. And so to remember that both things can be true. The quality of my appreciation for the invitation or the offer or whatever it is, and the fact that I can't go are both true, and they don't discount each other. So that's part of learning to say no with more of like a love and care in mind. All right. So the beautiful thing is none of you had a bad story about how it went when you said no. Not yet, anyway. Could still happen. Who was it last week? Was it Alana or Poppy who was going to say no to your dad?
That was me, and I didn't actually speak to him much this week, so that didn't happen, which is very good.
Okay, okay. Well, let us
Been so busy.
keep us posted on that if and when it happens during the class.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I'd written down what one of my I did a little no this week. I didn't have a big no this week, but it was just like I had two friends that I really love to catch up with that wanted to talk to me this week. And both of those friends, like, I really need to have like an hour. They're far away. I don't catch up with them very often. It's not like I want to get on and have 10 minutes with them. Both wanted to have a phone call this week, and I was just like slammed this week. And so it was just letting them know that no, I was too busy. I was exhausted. I really wanted, and the way I did it too was not just to leave it at, I don't have time and I'm really tired this week, but to say, I really want to be fully present when I love talking to you and I want to be able to be fully present and energized when we talk. So let's rebook. And they were both fine with it. But that's another way where you can like not focus so much on the negative and the reason why, but also like, why will it be beneficial to do it at another time? If it's something that you do want to do, but just want to do it at another time, is to let them know how important it is that you can be fully present for that thing and not be half asleep or fried and resentful, right? Because you don't have time to do it. All right, then the stick game video, right? I loved some of the comments on this in the classroom, but any lingering thoughts about it? So Alana, let's go with you first. What was your biggest takeaway from the stick game video between Rayleigh and Shiloh?
I think initially it was how I keep forgetting the Pasofino's name.
It's a weird name.
Really?
It's short for Relicario, like a Spanish Relicario. So it's Ray.
Okay, Rayleigh. Okay, I
Yeah.
need to like get that in my brain.
It's,
It was how he approached. He did like sort of like one step, and he had the cognitive ability to hold fire, and he stood still for a very small amount of time to see how Shiloh was going to react, and then he moved closer with the stick, and I found that was just so amazing because I can't even do that. Once I go in, I go straight into whatever I try to do. So seeing that small snippet of he just stood back, although he really wanted that engagement, he just stood there, and that second for him probably felt a lot longer because he was so eager to, get to grips. And then he he didn't get what he wanted from that, from what I saw, because he was so like, I want to play, I want to play. And then Shiloh was adamant after a lot of tries that he didn't want to, and he just stepped back and he was fine with it. It didn't go how he wanted, but he just took that as an experience, and I think that was really, really cool to
yeah,
see.
yeah. I haven't seen too many. Well, this one was so obvious because it was like a stick in a game, but with horses being able to see like that clear dialogue back and forth and like self-regulation on Rayleigh's part. So Rayleigh was very, very, I think horses only kind of engage in that level of conversation when he was very calm. He was very self-regulated. There was no he just was like fully focused on that dialogue between them. And I do love what you said. He had an agenda, kind of, because we often say don't have an agenda with your horses. We're allowed to say what we want, right? Like that's what two authentic beings are. So Rayleigh didn't have any qualms about saying, I would like to play this stick game. Like we have fun doing this, right? And Shiloh was like, yeah, but now you picked up that big old stick. Like, I don't think I can do this. That's felt like a different game to him or a different request to him. Um, but yeah, he had an agenda, but he didn't lose sight of the relationship was ultimately more important than the agenda. Although he did ask multiple times, right? It was like, he was like, I want to be really sure that's a no.
Yeah,
And
because I think one of the times he accidentally touched his neck with the twig, and it kind of spooked him a little bit. So I think maybe he understood that and was like, I'm just gonna try one more time because I think because I touched you with that stick, I want to make sure that it wasn't just that and that you truly do not want to play. So I think he was just giving him a lot
right.
of chances almost.
Yeah, something that I think we think about with our horses, and maybe we don't think about it enough with people, is like maybe I need to ask differently. or ask with a different energy, or right. So there's like the hard no's, which he didn't get. Like that would have been like Shiloh being like, gone, I'm out of here. But Shiloh was still engaging in the conversation. So really kept trying to ask a little bit differently. And what I wish I had captured was what happened right after I ended the clip. It's the thing about not knowing what you're doing, what you're clipping. And I was like in the middle of something else. So I just tried to do it. And then I was like, oh, I think they're just gonna, whatever. I didn't know what I thought. But anyway, right after I stopped the video, really actually just put the stick down and walked away. Like almost to just say, it's done. And I wish I had caught that, because it really showed that he did give up the converse. Like he did stop asking after that point. And it was very clear the way that he stopped asking.
I think I also put a comment underneath the video where Charlotte almost looked like your average person that doesn't know how to say no. He sort of let his boundary go multiple times, and he didn't give a clear, like, I don't want to do this. It reminded me of me in that situation where I didn't say no to her. I said the opposite. I kept inviting her in, like, I'm going to go there with you, when actually I didn't want to. So that's kind of how I literally felt and looked, probably.
That's a very, very interesting point too. Also, and you know, some of this can be like projecting onto Shiloh. It's speculation, right? So we don't know exactly what was going on with him. But I do also know, because I live with him and I see things, that he has what seems to be trauma responses to particularly hands that move toward him, or anything that's in a hand that moves toward him. I don't even do sticks with him because I'm pretty sure that's like way overboard for him. But it almost seemed like it potentially could be a bit of a trauma response, where you're like, I want to engage, but what you're doing is like, I can't get past this thing that's like, I don't know, right? It could possibly have a trauma response angle to it. But again, I don't want to project on him exactly what was happening, but I love that you were able to see something that maybe showed you something in yourself, right? With how he was behaving, whether that was actually what was going on with him or not. Yeah. Martine, I loved what you said in the thing about wishing you had more of the context, but go ahead, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we could sit there for 2 hours and just watch them, right? But I guess similarly, like I just loved how he was just like, I'm just going to ask my question. I think we're all allowed to have agendas. Like that's the whole point of asking for things, right? It's just recognizing when a no is a no, and then playing with that. Like he really played with it. Like he was like offering different things, and I was noticing he was really like, he had some snappy moves too, like following Shiloh and stuff. And I was like, I was able to see it now where I am now with my little spicy one, because I am embodying that myself so much more. It's just like, I'm just asking you a question. Like you can say no, or we can have a conversation about it.
Yes.
And yeah, it was just such a healthy, it seemed like such a healthy position from his perspective anyways. Like, and yeah.
Yeah, it really did. And it'll be interesting when you see later kind of the dynamic with the smaller stick, because in those dynamics, Shiloh is actually the one that is much more confident, and Rayleigh almost has some like interesting like reactions of like almost like fear and insecurity. So it was so beautiful for me to see Rayleigh be the one, right? And that's like, God, did the stick change the dynamic that much? Like, I don't know, but it allowed him to embody a different way of being. And he did it so beautifully. It was like, man, you got some skills with this.
We
When
get
you're
a part 2?
What was that?
We get a part 2?
Yeah, I don't think it's this next one. I think it's the next module, but you will see
Spoiler
like
alert.
another little stick video
Yay.
with a different dynamic. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah. So Poppy, what about you? Anything else to add?
I found it so nice the way that Rayleigh, he kept asking in such a nice way. So I see so much of Willow and Shiloh, and I think with Willow at first, after I'd kind of had my everything I thought I knew, I don't think I know anymore. I then got really into like all the consent-based stuff, which I'm still really into, but I kind of didn't really know how to do it properly. And there was a while when I had a huge thing about putting her halter on, because I thought, if for me it symbolized taking away her voice. And I was like, she goes shut down as soon as it's on. It's like, no. But anyway, we've worked through that, and she's got a really different relationship to it now. But I'd sort of hold it out, and if she even moved her head away from it a tiny bit, I was like, that's a no, the halter's away. And like, and it would like mean that I didn't, it was almost like me saying, I don't believe you can do this, you know. I'd be like, oh no, knew it. And like the way that he kept going, okay, I get this, are you sure, because I'd like to hold this opportunity open for you. Just like the same thing that you were saying of like that it could be a trauma response. It's almost like they can see that it's like, is this completely you, or is this actually something from your past? And it's like something that I'm really trying to get into a lot more with Willow, of that, just like giving her a second chance and going, okay, let's try. And just not in a kind of, you're not allowed to say no way at all, which exactly was how the horses were in that video. But it's just like, it almost, in a weird way, if you do it right, it can be empowering to them to actually be like, no, I believe in you here. And then like letting it go if that needs to happen. So yeah, that was just so nice. And like even things like the way that he approached and his body language with like the curves on the outside, I was like, oh my god, that's how I do it. And I was like, this is so like validating to see him deal with it in a way that we were all like, this is wonderful. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And yeah, so that was just really nice to kind of see those parallels. And just
It's like a master class, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah, totally.
And I really, really love what you just said, because it did seem like he was saying, you got this. I think you got this. Like, you're all right. Like it was more supportive, that it wasn't judgmental. It was just like, he's like, come on, yeah, I think you got this. And there was this beautiful part where Shiloh actually came in and almost put his mouth on it, right? But he couldn't open his mouth. He was just like, I'm there, but I can't take it. And really was like, that's when really was like, just take it. And then it touched Shiloh and he was like, no. But it was like he came really close. Yes. So anyway, all of that, yes, I love the hearts that Martine was sharing. That was beautiful, beautiful way to put it. Absolutely. So much care and cleanness in that dynamic and that exchange between them. So beautiful. But yes, we are allowed to have an agenda, or a what I like even more than agenda is maybe we're allowed to have an intention or a desire or a request, right? Agenda kind of sounds like, well, they're all human words where we got to stick with it, right? But it's we are totally allowed to have ideas and thoughts and desires and intentions, and to share those, and also to honor how others respond to it, and to know that, you hate to say no isn't always no, because there's that whole thing, but no is no. There's big no's, there's little no's, there's I'm not sure's, there's maybes. I'm not even sure. I said really you can say anything with yes and no, because there's different levels of no, but it's beautiful when we can get into the like gray areas, which is what I think they were trying to negotiate there, was the gray area, until it was clear it wasn't a gray area. Yeah. All right. So week 3. It's 1:20 now, so I don't have much to say about this. I just want to introduce it a little bit. Oh yeah, week 3 is big. So week 3 is codependency and boundaries. I don't know if any of you think of yourselves as codependent, but I'm going to break some news to you here. I think every human being in some way struggles with codependency on one side or the other. It is everything in human society encourages codependency. So it's not this dirty word. It's actually just, I think, a really useful understanding that it's rampant in the human world, but it isn't healthy dynamics. Healthy would be, healthy interdependence, right? There can also be unhealthy independence, where I don't need anybody and all of that, right? That's not healthy either. What we want is healthy interdependence. But Dr. Charles L. Whitfield wrote a book on codependence. He's also the author of Healing the Child Within. So it's kind of an older book, but really, and And it's not a fun read. It's like a very scientific read. But I read this book when I was trying to understand codependence. And he said that it is the addiction to looking outside of ourselves for the source of or the key to our own happiness. It can also be not just happiness, but to our own peace or our own contentment, right? But we're looking outside of ourselves for that. And then this is what got me. He says, it is the addiction that all other addictions are based in. Alcoholism is looking outside of ourselves to alcohol, right? To be able to have a good time, to feel better, to feel good. Shopping, food, whatever it is that we are addicted to, that we're trying to use to make us feel better, that's codependence. So it's not just codependence isn't just between individuals. And as you see, it is rampant in our world. And everything that capitalism does about advertising and shopping, right? Advertising is constantly telling us about things we want or need to make ourselves feel better, or to be more fulfilled, or to be more complete. So we are bombarded with this, and we're conditioned in this way. So it takes understanding that so that we can start to separate ourselves from it. Most people are living in it and don't even know it, don't even recognize that this is what's happening. So that's the first step. And then we can start to like work with it, right? And particularly in the places where that is robbing us of our happiness consistently, making us feel constantly not in control of our own well-being and our own happiness. Those are the areas where we really want to work on it. So this week is all about digging really deep into people-pleasing tendencies, because that is another form of codependence. And I lived this for the longest time in my family growing up, in my first marriage, I couldn't be happy unless the other people in my life were happy. If they were upset, if they were discontent, if they were depressed, if they were anything else, I was whatever they were. Like I couldn't be happy unless they were. That is the definition of codependence. We can have empathy for people, but we don't need to have sympathy. Sympathy is when we take on their emotions as if they're our own, or that we have to feel it as deeply as they do. I can have empathy for what you're going through and care and concern for you without taking it on and without feeling like I have to be responsible for fixing it. This is deep stuff. That's what we're going to dive into this week. And it gets deep. So in the experiential practice, we're going to really lean in even more, Alana and everyone, to the power pause, right? Which is really pausing before we automatically agree to things, or even to like deciding how we feel about something. Take a power pause. And we're going to practice that intentionally. We're also going to be looking into, so we did affirmations this week that are things that we're trying to practice saying. Last week we did affirmations. This week we're going to be paying attention to the negative self-talk that's in our head. Because this is tied to it's all tied in with codependency and people pleasing as well. If we're having negative self-talk toward ourselves, then we're going to look for things outside of ourselves to make us feel better, because we're not lifting ourselves up on the inside. We're not being a good friend to ourselves. We're not being loving to ourselves. We're being judgmental, right? Or critical of ourselves. And so that's going to make us want to look outside of it, because we're not a safe space in here. Then we're going to look for safety and comfort on the outside. So we're going to look at those negative self-talk cycles as well, and starting to find some ways to break those. One of the things I've learned in my own experience is I used to want to just make that talk stop, right? I'd be like, just make those voices stop, make all that negative self-judgment stop. A lot of times these are really ingrained, right? And they kind of have become core beliefs in our life. But what we can do is be in a different relationship with them. So when I hear it or it starts, I can say, thank you so much for your input. No, that's not helpful right now, right? I'm not going to go down that road with you. So we can't necessarily make it stop, but we can not buy into it. not feed into it, not lean into it, not start getting anxious about it. Again, Martine is like, oh, I have the choice to choose. I can choose not to believe these feelings, these thoughts that I'm having. So it's about being in relationship with them differently rather than just judging ourselves because we're still having them. It's like, just can we learn not to stay in them? Can we work with them? Can we dance with them? Can we say, thank you? Thank you for being there. Not helpful. I don't want to go down that road. So again, it's kind of like saying no to something, right? Again. All right. And then this week you have 2 horse behavior videos. And one is an example of how a horse, particularly one like Shiloh, who was feral and has not, I think he did go through a period of desensitization, but he was not desensitized to human contact and interaction early in his life, right? He lived at least 5 years not having any of that. So he does not naturally demonstrate people-pleasing tendencies at all. Most domesticated horses have learned to have at least some people-pleasing tendencies because it makes life easier for them. So the first video is just a really quick little one, but it shows it very clearly how he's not worried about whether he's pleasing us or not. And he's very honest in how he feels about in interactions with people. And then the second one is some training. I don't do a lot of training. I do mostly relationship building, but with Shiloh, I have struggled to know how to help him with his trauma. And this kind of is an interesting thing to get into as well. Shiloh is so convinced that he doesn't need people in his life and that there's really nothing good going to come out of that for him, that he would never choose. Like, he chose to stay in that dialogue with Rayleigh. With a human, he'd be out quick. He's not going to stay. He has much more trust in his relationship with Rayleigh than he does with people. He doesn't know what is in it for him with people still after being with me over a year. He's still in that place. So I have used food to some extent. He will stay engaged in the conversation a little bit more and longer if there's the prospect of food. Now, that can feel like manipulation, right? So it's a very fine line. In this video, you'll see me playing with that a little bit. And it was a video when he was first starting to, I could tell he was like, maybe I want to have this conversation. Maybe I might like a little bit of the touch, right? It was just a little bit of him starting to be in that place. And it's still that way. Like, I can use food to get him kind of into the conversation with me, and then we can proceed with the conversation without food. But if I don't have the food to begin with, he won't enter into the conversation. Still pretty fascinating. So it still tells me a lot about how that trauma is affecting him. He still would be rather like, overall, I still would rather not have the conversation. And unless there's a high incentive for me to do it, I'm not going to do it. So the video is just, it's a little bit longer clip, and it's just you seeing me playing around with that. It's not a training video. It's not me saying I know what I was doing. It was really me just exploring with him and trying to see if he could even talk to me, like engage in a conversation about what he likes or doesn't like. When you have a trauma response and you're kind of frozen, you know, he will let things happen sometimes, but you can tell he's not really doesn't have an opinion about it one way or the other. He's just like, oh my God, it's happening, right? So that's again where we get into like playing with trauma is interesting. But yeah, I don't want to condition him to be a people pleaser. I want him to wake up and start talking to me about what he wants and what he doesn't. I want him to feel safe enough to have that conversation. So I think there'll be some things in both your horse training and maybe in personal relationships that might come to light in watching that video. So those are the 2 of those for this week. We're almost at 1:30, but is there anything anybody wants to say in closing, or any questions about this week or next week? All right. I love how you guys are engaging with everything. We're just going to keep getting deeper. So have fun this week. I'll see you in the classroom, and yeah, feel free in the comments if you have questions or anything, but we're just going to add another layer on this week. Okay. Proud of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good week.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.